Let's compare two upgraded bumpers for your Cybertruck. On today's video, I'll be covering the two most common bumper upgrades for your Cybertruck. I'll be starting with this Nerfbar style here, eventually this more rugged, heavy-duty steel version. I got the Nerfbar style, which you just saw from EVBASE about 5 months ago now, so I'm really well versed in it. I got this more heavy-duty one behind me from Tesstudio. I've had it on now about a month, so I'm starting to figure this out pretty good. I'll refer to the one behind me here often as the heavy-duty steel one, and I'll refer to the one with the tubes on it as the Nerfbar style throughout this video. I've already done step-by-step installation guides with the Tesstudio one behind me, as well as the EVBASE one. So this video is going to be just a raw comparison and not a how-to. Now, if you want to see how I did either one of these, I'll spell it out really clearly in a video that I've already done. I'll put the link to both of those videos down in the description below, as well as the link to where you can jump on either the EVBASE or Tesstudio site and pick either one of these up. And if that's the case, both these companies have partnered with me. If you'll use my channel name, CARisma, you'll be able to get 20% off no matter which route you choose. So first, I'll start with the composition of this bumper. It's very heavy, very stout, very sturdy. You won't be disappointed if you're trying to get to hold up to. It'll take an impact and won't really notice. It'll hold up to a lot more than what you'll see that Nerfbar style will. It also has a really nice texture to it that's similar to something that like a bed liner would have. It's hard to sometimes pick up on video, but it's like a very grainy, granular, just like a textured style to it. So again, it's gonna help you hold up to like nicks and scratches and dings. If you were to actually have a series of impacts with this, it's gonna hide a little bit better with this finish. The composition of the EVBASE, more of the Nerfbar style one, are still a steel, but they're gonna be obviously a little bit thinner steel where the tubes are. While the anchor points are still a very heavy industrial steel, the tubes, although thinner, are still a steel. They're gonna hold up to some significant force, maybe just not to the degree that the other style would. Now, the finish of the Nerfbar style is very smooth. There's no texture to it whatsoever. Now, that might lend to showing a scratch, but at the same time, it's also a clean, nice, neat look to it. Installation. That part was nearly the same. It's the same basic platform, the same hubs. This hub here is the same as the hub on the other model. While the installation is nearly identical, the one thing you had to do with the other bumper was take it out and move this little camera. That is just a slight extra step that you don't have with this bar. That being said, it does inhibit the vision just slightly. I'd say about 5 to 10% of the top of your screen is inhibited with this bar, whereas it's like half, so you had to move it with the other bumper. Now, that being said, the benefit of all that is your camera now is out closer to your truck, so it gives you better spatial awareness of how far you can go up to something before you'll hit it. That being said, I'm not sure which style I'm gonna go with for a permanent solution on my truck, but even if I were to go with this Nerfbar one, I'm still trying to figure out a way to bring this camera out a little bit, because I actually like the idea of the camera being on the very tip of my bar. So as mentioned, those main little brackets that sit on the tow hooks are literally the exact same bracket. And the main little hubs that actually sit on those brackets are nearly identical between the two. The only difference is you don't have to move that front-facing camera at all, so the installation is slightly easier on this style. So let's talk functionality. So that really depends on what your version of functionality is. What are you hoping it does? If you're trying to protect your truck from head-on collision, that might differ on what kind of collision. Is it a deer? Is it an automobile? Is it just driving through brush? That's really hard for me to determine on my own. One thing about this steel bumper is it does set off at a slight angle from the front of the truck, and it needs to do that and able to allow the hood to raise up. So we've already well established now the front of this bumper sticks out from the truck, but just how far? At the furthest protruding point, you're looking at just over 6.5 inches. Whereas the Nerfbar style here, compared to the same distance, is gonna stick out about not quite or just under 4 inches. Which means the Nerfbar style here is gonna sit closer to your truck about 2.5 inches. So that's a pretty minimal measurement. The only way that would matter is if you're trying to park in a garage and space is really at a premium for you. This is another one where half of it's very similar, and that's the fit. They both fit, in my opinion, really well. While this beefier steel bumper is a little more rigid and it does stick out a little farther so it might meet the collision sooner, it does lack a little bit of the coverage that the other one has. Specifically down in this area here, this is all uncovered. If you were doing something like pushing another car, for example, it wouldn't be quite the same because you just have these two knobs where the little hubs are out in the beginning and this little steel U up top. This is again gonna be good if you hit like a deer impact like that, but it's gonna be a lot harder to push a vehicle. Now, I don't know how often you're pushing vehicles. I basically never do that because what you give up in coverage down here, you gain in coverage up here. If you're not pushing anything and it's just aesthetics, get the one that you think the look is the best for you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out that this heavy duty bumper does seem to wrap around the edge of the truck better than what the other model was. So in the rare event that you had an absolute like corner collision with anything, whether it's a wall or a vehicle or a deer, anything, you are gonna get a little bit extra coverage around the end that you wouldn't get with the other. Maybe that makes up a little bit for the fact that you're giving up this coverage down low. Now the coverage of the Nerfbar style. I mentioned earlier on that heavy duty steel one, it wraps around the edge of this a little bit more, which isn't a huge deal, but it would give you slightly more protection on a quarter angle alignment or something you're not hitting exactly head on. Another potential benefit of the Nerfbar style is there's a ton of different brackets out there on the internet that are meant to grip onto bars like this to where you could mount lights like this. Now I'll be mounting, I think, 4 different of these here over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're curious to see how I'm able to wire those all in. They're both sturdy enough to stand on to carry some weight. In fact, on both of these, including the steel bumper, the actual weakest point would be the anchors to where they're actually fastened to the old tow hooks. So in recap, the couple downsides to the steel bumper. It is significantly heavier. You do have to move this backup camera, and it is a little less customizable as far as adding things to those Nerf bars. The upside, the fact that it is heavier, made of steel, it's likely much more durable, and it's gonna stand up better to any front end collision, whether that be with brush, deer, or other vehicles. And it also has that little like edgy, sharp angle design, which would work well, especially if these are the running boards you went with, something like these. I also got these from Tesstudio. So they match that cybertruck kind of feel, the edgy design. Now the same with the Nerfbar. The downsides are it does have a smooth finish to it, so it's more susceptible to scratches and abrasions, things like that. It also doesn't add any coverage or protection to the upper stainless front of that hood area at all. It's all below the plastic bumper line. And lastly, it does seem to be a much thinner grade steel. It's lighter, which would make sense. So especially in that tubing area, it would be likely more to dent in the case of a front end collision or a pushing or something like that. But with that, let me start on the upsides. Because it's a thinner walled steel, it's actually much lighter, so it's a little bit easier to handle to put off and on the truck if you need to. The installation is a little bit quicker on this model because you don't have to mess with that front facing camera at all. But also it's a little bit easier on your mind too to know that I don't have to move this, and it's one less thing you have to do. It's going to be a little bit more customizable, as mentioned about, it's easier to add some lights and things like that on these bars already designed for other millions of different lights out there on the market. And the last upside is, it is slightly cheaper than the bull bar style, so there's that. Something I'll point out I've noticed in the Colorado snow is obviously you already know, if you're familiar, there's a little ledge here that snow will set on and kind of impede your headlight. Which, by the way, you'll want to subscribe to the channel because later on I've got a new light bar coming that's going to fill this void here and just partially take that away. This bull bar sets slightly lower. Only this part here is flush with the plastic of the truck. The bar here sets slightly below, and then obviously there's a gap in between. The steel bumper sits right level with this edge and actually extends this lip a little bit, which leaves a larger flat surface area to catch snow. So the little bit I've driven around with this one compared to the other steel one, I do notice the other one accumulates snow, whereas this Nerfbar one does not accumulate in the same way. Let me demonstrate more about that ledge I was talking about. So this little light here is what you're gonna see me install later, because if you haven't already, you just now hit that subscribe button because you wanna see how this bad boy goes in. I'll drop this probably later in the week, if not next week. So this is supposed to solve the problem of snow landing on this ledge. So it's basically gonna install up in here just like this and extend out to where it's flush with the edge of the frunk so snow can't accumulate and block it. However, that's going to be null and void with this bulky bumper, because what's going to happen is snow is still going to land on this bumper. So if you're doing this to get away from that, it's not really an issue. Now, if you're in a warmer climate like Florida, doesn't usually get snow, this is something you're never going to be affected by, and just get what you like then, and the shelf issue is really a non-issue for you. Now, there's no question that the other style of guard is slightly more stout and would probably hold up to an impact resistance a little bit better. However, the benefit of this one with that larger surface area would be better if you had to push something, like if you had to push a car or push cattle or even potentially drive through thick brush. That larger surface area is going to just be better overall for trying to push anything out of your way. So here's the two of them side by side, assembled yet not mounted on the truck. Let's walk through a couple of these comparisons this way. The first thing you're going to see from the above angle is just what I mentioned earlier, is how much more curved the heavy duty one is compared to the other, where it kind of wraps around the truck. You're also going to notice here that these little hubs or these little center joining mounts are nearly the same. They're just slightly different how they're shaped. Not a big deal. Now that Nerfbar one, as you see here, it's going to extend down slightly below what that anchor point is. As you can see there, because it has the bottom bar to support, whereas the steel one's going to stop flush with that bottom point, again, just going to the point of it's not sticking down as far. And obviously the Nerfbar ones, they're gonna mate inside, whereas the other ones butt up against it. Now here's the same comparison from a front-on view, and what I did is I put the steel bumper up on a little 4x6, because this brought it up to where they're basically sitting at the same height that they would on your truck. So from a straight level point of view, you can see they would be just about level, but obviously this is where you have the big U sticking up here on the steel bumper. Now with the two of these literally side by side, it does bring up some things I hadn't thought about before. The Nerfbar design that I got from EVBASE is totally seamless, whereas the steel one that I got from Tesstudio, you do notice all the little junction and seam points. This is what I mean. So there's no seam here, as you can see it goes in, because all the seams are made back in the back. Same thing on this side. Let's go over to the steel bumper though. You can see right where they meet up, and it's very clear and obvious that this is a piece, this is a piece, this is a piece, this is a piece. Now, are the seams a deal breaker? No, of course not. It's just something worth pointing out. Lastly, the look. I know there's some people that don't like anything round or tubular on the truck just because it's sharp and edgy, but for the reasons I just mentioned, as far as like being able to mount lights and things like that, it does still have benefits, and it looks like a more traditional truck. I think that's probably the biggest way I can describe it as. This one looks more traditional, as the other more beefier style looks a little bit more cybertruck-ish feel. Now, if you were to go this route, the benefit is EVBASE also has running boards that to me very much match this. In fact, they even pair them together on their site where you can bundle them together and save as much as like 15, 16% off if you get both of these at the same time. Now, I'm sold on both the grill guards and the running boards for your truck. I'd highly recommend you getting one. Hopefully I pointed out here today though, that there are two distinct styles that very much go with each other. I'll put the links to both of them down below. Whether you get yours from EVBASE or Tesstudio, they've both partnered with me. If you use my channel name CARisma, you'll get 20% off of already their low prices. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. Get these two in a bundle together. It's the way to do it. Thank you as always for watching. If this is a video you appreciated, make sure you subscribe, because I'll be doing 2 more big comparison videos in the next month. I'll be comparing 3 different light bars for the truck, but also later on this week, I'll be comparing the 2 major rear view camera, digital camera backup displays. So you won't want to miss either one of those. Until next time.